Well, joining me is the Conservative Member of Parliament for Chingford and Woodford, former leader of the Conservative Party, Iain Duncan Smith. Iain, good evening. You heard, of course, what David Lammy had to say at Chatham House. This really would be Brino, wouldn't it?
Well, I must say I was slightly taken by his remarks concerning the European Research Group and his comparison with the Nazis. The truth is that it's called democracy, David, and, you may not like them, but we were elected and we're entitled to have our views. All we ever asked for was to leave the European Union and get on with our own, sort our regulations out, make sure we do deals with other countries and make the most of it. And that's really where we are at the moment.
Well, Iain, I mean, you could say that, but I mean, I'm, as you know, passionate Brexiteer. I look at the absolute failure to control our borders, be that legal or illegal immigration. I look at the fact that virtually no business regulations have been simplified, and that especially matters for 5.5 million men and women running small businesses. I mean, do you understand why a lot of people are very disappointed with the delivery of Brexit that we've had from the Conservative Party?
Well, there's no question we need to get these things done. The problem, forgive me, the problem has been that we had COVID for 2 years, and it really bust a huge amount of possibilities for us. But we're getting on with it now. We've got the bill that's just gone through to get rid of retained EU law. That, all right, you might have argued should have happened before, but it took a while to sort out, but that's going through. We are now beginning, and I wrote the report called the Tigger Report, which is about regulatory change. Now, they're now moving on that to make big changes. Financial Services is now talking about getting rid of Solvency II, which is a big deal for the city. There's others like MiFID, which they'll move on to. But we've also got a lot going on now in the regulation side, and that also includes farming and the environment. So there are big changes coming down the tracks now. So, yes, I would love it to have happened earlier, but I think all things considered, the key thing is we get it done so that the UK is well and truly and properly out. We have Northern Ireland to sort still, which is going on, but that can only end with one single decision, which is no part of the United Kingdom will ever be under a law from a foreign organisation, in this case European law. That old American adage, no taxation without representation, holds good for Northern Ireland as it did for the United States.
Yeah, all good. You know, if those things happen, I'll be delighted. But it will be 7 years in June since we voted. So please forgive my frustration on these issues, along with many others. You didn't mention borders, Iain. You know, taking back control. And there's no doubt that the reason in that, and you spotted it on the day, the reason we got the turnout we got in the referendum, a lot of people, especially in working class communities, voting for reduced numbers coming into Britain. There's been no delivery on that at all, and nor do I see any prospect of it.
Well, there is a bill now about to go through the House, which will ensure that those who come illegally will not stay here in the country. And that's a critical element. The government's about to launch that bill. We should get that through reasonably quickly. We need to stop the illegal boats coming and those coming through illegally at the moment. That's the key.
Well, I don't believe a word of it until we leave the ECHR, but we'll have that debate in another day. I must ask you quickly about China. It's a subject that you've spoken out on. We've seen yet another report that 40 British universities have taken very large sums of money. But this other report that's come out from Charles Parson suggesting that microchips, Chinese microchips, you know, could be in our cars, our washing machines, or even our light bulbs. Is Westminster, I know you are, but is Westminster taking the threat, the potential threat of the Chinese spying on every aspect of our lives? Are they taking it seriously in that building?
Well, I think individual MPs are certainly taking it seriously. More and more of them are gathering. I said of an organisation called the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. We now have 30 countries with co-chairs, parliamentary co-chairs, and all 30 from Japan to the United States. No question at all that we are taking that seriously. Governments, I'm afraid, across the West have been slow to respond to what is essentially a very direct threat to the way we live our lives by China. And critically, of course, it's a matter of pushing them. The present government still isn't quite over the line with this, so we get a government policy which doesn't quite meet the ask. But we really need to recognise that they are capable of spying on us. They are doing it regularly. They have planted their money into lots of universities, made them very dependent on China. Huawei has set up their operations in Cambridge. I wonder why. And they're banned from doing the telecom stuff. So huge real threat. And if Russia succeeds in holding on to Ukraine, I tell you, that immediately emboldens China to have a go at Taiwan. And so this thing is very important. China poses a very serious threat to us. All governments will recognize it.
Well, they should do. Iain, a final thought, just picking up on Ukraine. Boris Johnson has been in Ukraine for the last couple of days. Today, for the first time, explicitly calling for Ukraine to join NATO, something that could put us as a country on direct collision course with Russia. Is he right to suggest Ukraine should join NATO?
Well, I don't think it's going to happen for some time to come. And I think Ukraine has to settle. It needs to be stable. There's an awful lot of money is going to have to be spent to try and get them up. Some say well over $1 trillion will need to be spent to get the infrastructure back up as and when this war is over. I think the key thing right now is not that they join the NATO, because that would add an element to this. I think the key thing is that we make sure they have all the military equipment it takes to be able to fight this war. They're quite capable, I believe, of winning it, having been out there myself before Christmas. I don't fully agree that you need to do it now, but I do think in due course that will probably happen. But the key thing, let's get the tanks to them. And I hear the good news tonight is that Germany has finally relented and agreed now to let the tanks go, which is good news. They need those. They need long-range artillery. And when I was out there, they said we need munitions dramatically and support for our soldiers in the hospitals. And all of these things, we should back them. Their war is our war in any way, but they are going to fight it. We need to make sure they have the right equipment to beat the Russians and to actually end this ghastly invasion.
Iain Duncan Smith, thank you for joining me here on GB News.